Well, the last thing I'll say about Chase Claypool is he did not move the needle for me. This wasn't a signing where I said, yes, we are set now.
Sure.
The Super Bowl is back on now that the Bills have Chase Claypool. But it did make me realize something. And I thought this is very interesting. So I saw that the Bills signed Chase Claypool, and I'm like, he's pretty big, right? And I looked it up, 6'4, 238. And I was like, that's weird. I feel like we've seen that size before. Maybe not the 238 pounds, but at least a 6'4. So then I looked into it, and here's what I tweeted. I said, I know the Bills signed Curtis Samuel, but there seems to be a type of receiver that they've gone after so far this offseason. So they first signed Matt Collins, who's listed. Now, these are all on the Bills website. So the Bills have him listed at 6'4, 221 pounds. Then they drafted Keon Coleman, 6'4, 215 pounds. And then they signed Chase Claypool, 6'4, 238 pounds. And they still have Justin Shorter, who is 6'4, 223 pounds. So then I was thinking, you know what? We talked about this a little bit last week when Izzy and Anthony were on the show. And now I really want to talk about it because considering that the Bills haven't gone after that Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Tyler Lockett, fill in the blank. Based on this roster right now, I think that this is a Bills, specifically Joe Brady, saying, you know what? I want to continue to do what I did at the end of last year and what we did well. And that's how we were able to rip off 5 straight wins. We won that first playoff game, and we were finishing on a high note. I know the season didn't end on a high note, but the way they played from November to December into January, and that was where they went on these long sustaining drives. They got James Cook more involved. The offensive line was paving the way, and they started to use some of their players to their advantage. Someone like Ty Johnson could be a perfect example for this, where he had a specific role on this team. And I'm looking at all these wide receivers and their sizes. And one of the things about Keon Coleman that stood out from his draft profile was that all the scouts raved about his physicality and how not only can he make the tough contested catch and he's a big body receiver, but he is a willing run blocker and he does it well. And I was like, well, wait a sec. If you got Matt Collins, who is also described as a run blocker, he can play special teams. Now you have Chase Claypool. Then it clicked. I was like, I think this is Joe Brady saying, I want to continue to do what we did and maybe not be a first team, because I think if you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, you still want to utilize his arm, his cannon to your advantage. But I think that we are seeing a philosophical shift from where the last couple of years, Ken Dorsey just wanted to throw it all over teams. And it was literally just vertical deep shots, Allen to Diggs, Allen to Diggs. Now I think Joe Brady is trying to shift this, maybe with McDermott's tutelage, and saying, you know what, let's go on these longer drives. Let's get the run game going. That's why they drafted Ray Davis, maybe to complement James Cook. They want that big bruising back. They re-signed Ty Johnson. They're going to go 12 personnel again with the 2 tight ends. They re-signed Quentin Morris. So until I see a big wide receiver trade, I think this is what we're looking at for the 2024 Bills offense.
Yeah, and I mean, one more final name that you could have added to the graphics was Shavers as well, an undrafted free agent that has now been talked about as potentially another guy that could compete here with them, that has a chance, and mainly because maybe he fits that mold. But yes, they're looking for the 12 sets, the 12 personnel sets. When you're rolling out with Knox and Kincaid, the offense was better. Like, you say what you want about Knox, the offense was better with them both on the field. Like, they passed better out of 12 personnel. They actually run better out of 11. But they pass better out of 12, and it's been very successful for him. Hence why, you didn't see as much production for Davis and Diggs down the stretch. Khalil Shakir was getting open. They were utilizing 12. They were running the ball. They were in a pretty good situation. So to me, you have 2 good tight ends. Like, look, their tight end room is tops of the NFL. It's like close to the top of the NFL. Like, the combination is really good. Knox still hasn't gotten paid that much money from that extension. He keeps taking cuts. He keeps pushing out money. He hasn't really made a ton. So it's not like he's been overpaid yet. Finally, next year, maybe the year, if he doesn't take another cut. But ultimately, at this stage, Knox and Kincaid are very much so a very reasonable duo that can do everything. And Kincaid played a lot in line last year. He played 250 snaps in line. That's way more than I thought he would play in his rookie year. So he's playing tight end. He's very much so still developing in the blocking, and he showed way more from the blocking front than I ever thought he would. So between the two now you got Khalil Shakir, you got the versatility of Samuel. You're going to run 12. You're going to run a lot of blocking schemes in there. You're going to use Hollins in some of those situations, Coleman at times, what can Claypool do, but they're looking for those bigger receivers that can get open in one-on-one coverage, that can burn down the field or can make, as Brandon Bean likes to say, dogs that have rack, because there's going to be a lot of situations when they're in 12, and they're just going to be covered by a corner two, and the Bills can make headway that way, especially if you start to now line up, split from 12 personnel and you line up Kincaid in the slot. You're going to create a matchup nightmare to where you can't cover Kincaid, Shakir, Coleman with the personnel package that you may have on the field. So that's what the philosophical change is. You saw Brady very successful at it, even through the KC game, really struggled a little bit in the fourth quarter of the KC game. But before that, they were cooking on offense. And I don't use that term often. I don't like that term a lot. But they were a really good Chiefs defense. They were in good shape, scoring in the 20s on them early-ish on in that game in the third quarter, early in the third. So they were doing everything right in the first playoff game. They played really well down the stretch. But cooking, I think a biggest addition to this offense with Keon Coleman, obviously, and Curtis Samuel is going to be Ray Davis. I think his ability to catch out of the backfield, 7 touchdowns. He's one of the best receiving backs in college football with turning them into touchdowns. He's just got that quick step, that stutter action you're looking for. He just reminds me of a productive player, a guy that's going to be beneficial in an offense. And I think the Bills really upgraded the juice from that running back room. And I think he's going to be more of a competitive player than we think. So I think, someone that I'm looking for in this whole thing is Ray Davis and how he's going to add to this offense. And I think that he's going to be a really nice piece after his biggest comp, Kevin, just put it into comparison purposes. DeAndre Swift is who he almost directly compares to out of his height, weight, speed.
Well, that's a good comp. Now, here's what I'll say about this, because again, I think this is what the Bills are doing. And now, even if they do go acquire another big name wide receiver and it's that speedy or shifty guy, I think this is still their plan of attack, because think about it this way. If you do get that run game going and James Cook is just slicing his way through the hole, Ray Davis is barreling his way through and plowing his way up there, you're going to get the linebackers and the defensive backs to suck in and say, wow, this guy is really a threat. Actually, all of their running backs are a threat. We need to come up and play them. And even if they don't hand the ball off, they have guys like KJ Hamler and Curtis Samuel who they could just dump it off to underneath, and they could use their speed and shiftiness to take it to the house. So you get the linebackers and some of the defensive backs to want to come up, and that's when you use Josh Allen's arm to your advantage, and that's when you can slice up the defense and he can really air it out, because you get those defensive backs and the linebackers to suck in. That's when you take the top off. And I think it was the opposite with Ken Dorsey, where he wanted to take the top off, but they were just sitting back because they knew what Ken Dorsey wanted to do. So that's why I like Joe Brady, because he's more well-balanced. And he says, look, I think that the proper way to run the offense is, yeah, we're going to pass the ball a lot because we have Josh Allen, but we have to be able to run situationally. We have to be able to run at certain times. And then once you get the defense to really keep an eye on your running backs, that's when you throw it up the seam to Kincaid. That's when you go to Coleman, and that'll make the separation issues look better, because Keon Coleman is going to find himself wide open because the defense is trying to stop James Cook.